Rabbi Berger's at it again. He's just added Rabbi Riskin as one of his new targets. What did he target Rabbi Riskin with? That he's become too chummy with the Christians in teaching them, and he has violated the teachings of Rabbi Soloveitchik. And then he proceeds to attack Rabbi Riskin's base for teaching Gentiles today by saying that the whole question as to whether or not you're supposed to teach a Gentile the 7 commandments is probably disputed by a majority of the Rishonim and majority of the commentaries who disagree with Maimonides on this issue. And therefore, since the majority are against it, majority rule. And what is a citation? A citation is a very thorough rabbinical presentation by Rabbi Berger, which is found in the Jewish law under the heading of B'nai Noach, the sons of Noach, teaching them, and so on. Now, this is interesting that Rabbi Berger would take a position openly against Rabbi Riskin, probably because he's coming to the defense of the position of his Rebbe, Rav Soloveitchik, Zechet Tzaddik Livrocha. But I suspect that there's another issue over here that people are not getting. The champion in this generation of the obligation of teaching the world about the 7 commandments of the sons of Noach was none other than the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And since the Rebbe made this a position that encouraged hundreds, if not thousands, of shluchim to promote the 7 commandments to all the nations of the world, and in fact, I heard this from the Rebbe himself, that besides getting the Jewish people in our community to fulfill the 613 commandments, we have an obligation to also teach the 7 commandments to the Gentiles. So this is something that the Rebbe endeavored to do and did many, many activities to foster, to promote this. In fact, many dozens of heads of state signed a proclamation saying that they support the call for the world to accept the 7 commandments, the 7 Noachite commandments. This was signed by President Ronald Reagan, along with, I believe, another 41 or 42 heads of state. This was an incredible achievement at the time, getting all these heads of state to support this position. This is all because the Rebbe said that Maimonides says that it's an obligation upon us to get the nations of the world to fulfill the 7 commandments. So that's why Rabbi Berger has to argue with this particular point, because he could have said, what Riskin is doing is dangerously close to dialogue and disputation, and discussions are not the same, are the same as the disputations, and they run the same risk, and the Christians want to convert us, and this is something that is prohibited by many rabbis, including the Rav Zatzal, Rabbi Soloveitchik, who issued a proclamation against it, and all of Riskin's machinations against it don't work. That's all he should have said. Why did he attack the basis of the obligation to teach the 7 commandments of the sons of Noach? You know why? That's another way of attacking Lubavitch. So I wish to tell you the following, and the challenge is out there. Prove me wrong. Rambam is one of the major opinions. Whenever you have an opinion on Torah matters that's strict, you have to follow that stricture using the concept of Sfeika D'Oraisa L'Chumra. Whenever there's a question about Torah matters, you must be more strict, not more lenient. The fact that others disagree might tell you that if you didn't do it, you didn't do such a terrible thing. But initially, one should fulfill the opinions, the minority opinions in Torah matters, since there was never a convention of all of the Sanhedrin to issue a verdict on this. So number one, the fact that Rambam says this should be enough. Number two, Ravid in that part of Hilchos Malachim does not issue an argument against the Rambam there. And usually the Lubavitcher Rebbe says that the fact that he doesn't issue an objection is indicative that he agrees with what he says. Now there are many who disagree with that, who feel that Ravid didn't disagree with every single thing. Rather, he issued disagreements along many places, but not all the places. There are, this is a long discussion, which would require far more analysis and far more education than I'm able to deal with. I know that the Rebbe was of that position. The Rebbe certainly knew the Ravid and certainly knew all the arguments against that. Nonetheless, the Rebbe said emphatically that when Ravid does not mention anything on the page, it can be assumed that Ravid is in agreement with Rambam. And Ravid, that's the one that they claim is the opponent against Rambam's position that we have to teach the people of the world the 7 commandments. They bring it from they cite several places. I'm not going to bore you with all the places. It's going to be longer than this video can take. But I will tell you the following, the differences. Ravid says that enforcement of the rules are not enforcements that are incumbent upon individuals, but rather they're incumbent upon the court. And the court has certain procedures. The court does not go out to see if people are sinning. That's not the function of the court. The court deals with reports, with witnesses, and makes decisions based upon them and brings people into court and tries them in court. And therefore, Ravid's position is not that we don't have an obligation to teach. We do have an obligation to teach. But we have no obligation to enforce the laws. The ones who have the obligation to enforce the 7 commandments are the courts, the Bati Dinim. And today there is no Bezdin that can deal in life and death matters, or even to give stripes, even to give lashes. And therefore this is not upon the individual to punish anyone for not fulfilling the 7 commandments. That said, the fact that Ravid does not disagree with Rambam should give you pause and bring you to the opposite conclusion of Rabbi Berger in his article, and certainly against Rabbi Berger, that Ravid is of the opinion that we have an obligation to teach them, just no obligation to punish them, which is fine with me. I'm not interested in punishing anyone. And so, Professor Berger, Rabbi Riskin is correct. Rabbi Riskin says we have an obligation to teach them. The only problem is this format that he's using correct or not? But the reason why you attack that basis is because you wanted to attack Lubavitch, and you're wrong. And if you think you're right, disprove me. Thank you.